afternoon. Before we begin, I want to remind the committee members and members of the public to follow our meeting code of conduct. This includes commenting on the specific agenda item only and addressing the full body. All members of the committee, staff, and the public are expected to refrain from abusive language, and failure to comply with the code of conduct, which will disturb, disrupt, or impede the orderly conduct of this meeting, will result in removal from the meeting. With that, this meeting of the Neighborhood Services and Education Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Gandelas?
Present.
Torres? Duan?
Present.
Ortiz?
Present.
And Davis.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we, on item B, review of work plan, we do not have any items recommended to be added, dropped, or deferred, so we will move on to item C, the consent calendar. Does anyone want to pull the consent calendar item for discussion? If not, I am looking for a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. All right, do we need to do a?
You guys can do it electronically.
Okay, so we will vote. Oh, do we have any public comment?
There's no hands.
Okay, thank you. I figured you would interrupt me if there were.
So now I'm going to make sure we go to the next one. Just be prepared. So we're here. And I'll go back again.
All right, that item passes unanimously, and we will move to reports to committee. Item D1 is the Children and Youth Services Master Plan Status Report. Angel, will you kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Angel Rios, Deputy City Manager. And before I turn it over to the team, just wanted to, just kind of highlight that we're making some great traction in terms of engaging the community, stakeholders, nonprofit partners, business partners, the county, as we start winding down and are getting ready to come back to this committee and to the full council with a draft of the Children and Youth Master Plan. As an example, you heard from the Youth Commission the other day. You've heard recently about digital equity. You've approved previously the Youth Empowerment Alliance. A number of these different efforts, all centered around serving children and youth. And what this plan will do is tie all those together in a very strategic manner. And then starting first and foremost with our city programs and our investments here, but then coupling that with a way to coordinate with the county and other key providers so that we're leveraging resources, tapping into economies of scale. And that whole process has been a pretty amazing process to see because so many stakeholders have been leaning forward. But with that kind of framing, I want to pass it over to Laura and the team.
Thank you, Angel. Good afternoon. My name is Laura Buzo, Assistant to the City Manager in the City Manager's Office, supporting Deputy City Manager Angel Rios with the development of the Children Youth Services Master Plan. I'm also accompanied here by two of my peers, and I'll have them introduce themselves.
Jeremy Schaffner, Recreation Superintendent with the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services Department.
And I'm Vidya Kilambi, Division Manager for the Public Library.
It is our pleasure to be here today to provide you and the public a status update on the work accomplished thus far and the next steps as we move towards finalizing the Children Youth Services Master Plan. So our recommendations this afternoon is to accept the Children Youth Services Master Plan status report, direct staff to report and integrate Blue Zone assessment and findings throughout the design and implementation of the Children Youth Services Master Plan, and thirdly, to direct staff to return to Neighborhood Services and Education Committee on December 14th. In the interest of time, we won't go through in depth with all of the slides, and we'll move to slide 3. So before providing you an update on the Children Youth Services Master Plan, we just wanted to kind of ground this presentation on why this Children Youth Services Master Plan is so important to our community. We have all known that the City of San Jose has considerable community assets. Well before the U.S. News and World Report ranked San Jose as the second best place to raise a family in the country, in the recent list of best places to live for families in the U.S. While we celebrate this public recognition, it is equally important to acknowledge that many children and youth in San Jose have quite a different experience, particularly when we look at specific neighborhoods and populations. Unfortunately, there are persistent inequities, systemic racism, structural barriers, and generational trauma that often lead to poverty, displacement, violence, homelessness, and other poor outcomes. As you can see here, we just compiled some brief data points. Adult and juvenile populations criminally charged in Santa Clara County and juveniles arrested and cited in Santa Clara County are disproportionately represented in 6 San Jose zip codes. 58% of San Jose Latino, Latinx, and 58% of mixed multiracial populations have a high school degree or less. 70% of survey respondents from 9 Project Hope neighborhoods, about 1,800 of them, have a high school degree or less. 74% of the respondents identified as Latino or Latinx. Next slide. Families often do not have the access to resources and support systems and opportunities to undo these racial, social, economic, and educational health disparities and inequities. Over the years, the city has moved swiftly in advocating and addressing issues of homelessness, violence, blight, economic development. It's equally important to elevate the needs of children and youth to that same degree of urgency and call to action. In the aftermath of the pandemic, City Council recognized the importance of being proactive as opposed to reactive and focusing more intentionally in addressing the needs, inequities, and systemic and structural barriers that disproportionately place our San Jose children in vulnerable circumstances. So in the Mayor's June 2021 budget message, the City Manager's Office was directed to develop a comprehensive cradle-to-career youth development master plan. This was also further informed by 2 special joint meetings between the City of San Jose and Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors in 2021 and 2022. Equally important is to recognize the considerable accomplishments and the city has made around policies and strategies and initiatives that have focused on children, youth, and young adults. And we have a list of them here, so such as the education digital literacy strategy, the San Jose education policy, and more recently, the Youth Empowerment Alliance strategic plan. Next slide. So the overarching goal of the master plan is to create and expand pathways and supports from cradle to career for all San Jose children, youth, and adults from birth through age 24. The vision is that all children, youth, young adults, particularly those most vulnerable, have increased opportunity pathways to gain 21st century skills that lead to better health outcomes, sustainable employment, and a competitive living wage so they can continue to live and thrive in this community. Next slide. To achieve this overarching goal and vision, the master plan will serve as a roadmap and provide a strategic framework to change the narrative for children and youth in our community. The master plan will include guidance on policy priorities and investments, as well as commitment to systems transformation, working in partnership with the county as well as other community stakeholders in removing barriers and changing policies and processes to facilitate access to critical services. Ensuring that we provide a continuum of support for children and youth, as mentioned earlier, from cradle to career and from prevention to intervention. Develop an integrated service delivery system that provides increased access to services and providing wraparound services. Committing to a collective impact approach, bringing diverse sectors of the community together to co-design and develop an integrated service delivery system. And equally important, to develop long-term and sustainable impact and measurable outcomes that are shared by all of those working collectively. And all of these strategies will be framed under diversity, equity, and inclusion, generational trauma and inequities, structural racism, and barriers. Next slide. So as we developed and designed the Children Youth Services Master Plan, we engage in some robust community engagement activities. I want to acknowledge the continued support and partnership of the library, PRNS, Office of Economic Development, Work to Future, Office of Racial Equity, Housing, and many others, as well as families, children, and youth who came forward and provided their input, feedback, but also their dreams and wishes for our community. We had over 3,000 individuals that gave us input and feedback through a number of activities, whether it was an advisory or committee, through focus groups, town halls, listening sessions, or completing one of our surveys for parent caregivers and youth. As you can imagine, this engagement provided quite a considerable data, feedback, and input. And so to do our due diligence in uplifting the lived experiences, voices, and expertise of the community, and to effectively analyze the data, we recognize the importance of extending the completion timeline for the master plan to early winter. Next slide. Across the numerous community engagement activities, six key themes were raised consistently. These were common threads in all of our listening sessions and conversations. Many of these probably don't surprise you. Access and barriers around childcare and access to family support services, the importance of having connected neighborhoods and safe communities, housing access and security, learning and empowerment, meaningful and sustaining jobs, and mental wellness and belonging. We also heard consistently that all of these needed to be grounded around equity, accessibility and inclusion, and collaboration. Next slide. While I won't go through each of these, you can imagine some of the comments that came up and the importance of focusing on these themes around increasing access to many of these support services and resources such as childcare, housing, well-paying jobs. But also equally important is the importance of collaboration to make sure that these are supported across the different systems, not only just through the City of San Jose. Next slide. As we continue to finalize the Children Youth Services Master Plan themes and the priority areas, we will be including goals for each of them, key results, measurements and milestones that indicate how we know that we will accomplish our objective. Also objectives, making sure that we have tangible and actionable targets, and as well as indicators. We will also ensure that we're cross-mapping these with the Children and Young Adult Bill of Rights, as well as other city and county and community initiatives to make sure that we're leveraging and supporting these efforts across the different systems. And then on the side, you'll notice that we've also included just the ongoing importance of engaging youth and families, making sure that we're uplifting their voices and lived experiences, that they are part of the decision-making process, and making sure that we're being intentional in engaging marginalized and opportunity youth. Next slide. So as we mentioned previously, although our focus has been the completion of the Children Youth Services Master Plan, we learned early on as we engaged with community that it was equally important to develop an integrated service delivery system with a no wrong door entry that is equipped and responsive to the needs of children, youth, and young adults. No one entity holds that solution. Addressing complex challenges requires a collaborative network of policymakers, multidisciplinary providers, public entities, educational leaders, and many others. So this graph shows San Jose as a critical partner in that ecosystem, aligning ourselves in partnership with all the other entities that I mentioned. Next slide. San Jose is fortunate to have, I think you moved maybe back a little bit. San Jose is fortunate to have invested community stakeholders with expertise and resources to serve children and youth in helping us co-design this integrated service delivery system. We're developing an integrated service delivery system through a three-phase approach. We're moving from phase one, where we did the analysis and assessment, data collection, and now moving into phase two, where we're working in partnership with the community to co-design and develop shared culture, vision, and instruments to make sure that we are providing a system that regardless of where a family enters, they will be supported and given the appropriate resources. Next slide. So the next steps as we develop the Children Youth Services Master Plan, early part of the spring and summer, we drafted our data report. We also had some additional community briefing meetings to finalize some of that data and kind of sift through it and understand it a little bit more. And the remaining steps that we have is to continue working on this integrated service delivery system, finalize the Children Youth Services Master Plan, and continue to invite our community stakeholders in co-creating and designing so that we can make some systemic transformation. So on behalf of myself and Deputy City Manager Angel Rios and city staff who have been involved throughout this process, we want to thank you for your time, and collectively we want to make San Jose the best place to raise children and youth. Together we can ensure that regardless of the child's youth race, ethnic, or socioeconomic background, family history, LGBTQ+ identity, developmental disabilities, or zip code, that none of these factors taken together alone will be a barrier to accessing resources and support systems. Every child and youth in San Jose should grow up with the confidence that they can achieve their dreams and full potential. We have considerable work ahead, but we've also have some significant milestones that we've accomplished. And so with that, we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have any public comments?
There are no hands up.
Okay, great, thank you. Before I go to the members of the committee, I want to talk a little bit about blue zones. I know there have been some questions with that. So a few things about the Blue Zones Initiative for folks who don't know. It's really about improving the well-being of everyone in the community, and it's about bringing together people, places, and policy to do that, and really to address the health outcome disparities that we have and that were really laid bare during the pandemic, where we saw the divide of 101 really be a stark divide in terms of not only sickness but also deaths. And blue zones are places in the world where people live healthy, active lives to 100, and there are about 5 or 6 dozen blue zones project cities and certified cities across the United States that have seen massive jumps in the overall health of their communities, including places as small as Albert Lea, Minnesota, which was just on the Netflix documentary for Blue Zones. They was mentioned there are, I don't know, 15 to 20,000 people, and as big as Fort Worth, which is almost as big as San Jose. So it has worked in a lot of different places. And I've been working on getting the funding for an assessment for the city of San Jose, which fits in really nicely and builds upon the work of the Children and Family Youth Services Master Plan. The Children and Youth Services Master Plan, I always throw family in there because I think of it all together. And so the Blue Zones assessment would actually build on the community engagement work and works on the connected neighborhoods pieces of that, as well as the mental wellness and belonging pieces of that, which is why we, in discussions with Angel and Laura, put the assessment under here so that we're not working in parallel, but we're working together. This is it will be a joint city-county initiative and assessment. I've been working with Supervisor Cindy Chavez's office on that, and in fact, to that end, for both the master plan as well as the Blue Zones assessment, am going to be coming to rules to ask for a joint city-county committee meeting. So this committee and the county supervisor, the other committee that's similar to ours, to discuss this item in particular. So everything that was on the strategic framework slide basically is covered in the assessment, and it brings in the nonprofits that are all kind of part of the constellation as well for that assessment when we get to that. We are also working, so the city and the county will be the main funders of the initial assessment, and we are also working with the Health Trust and some of our local employers to kick in for that assessment. So just wanted to give you guys a status update on where that is. And Christine Kraft in my office, for those of you who don't know, has been working on that funding piece. So that's kind of why we put all of these things together. So just want to make that all clear, and I want to thank Laura and Angel for working with my office on this Blue Zones initiative, and also honestly with OED and D3, we've been already working on Plaza Azul, which is part of that. And for all of you I think all of you have been on a longevity walk with me, so we're already kind of doing some of the things in addition to the policy pieces that the city has already put in place, and this is really just a way to tie everything together so that we can improve the connectedness of our communities, and also it'll give us an opportunity to really focus in on those specific zip codes that are having really disparate outcomes. So with that, I will see if I can figure out this system, which I'm not very good at. Where do I go to the, thank you. All right, Councilmember Torres.
Good, thank you. I actually have a lot of questions because this is near and dear to my heart from someone who is, an at-risk youth in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and of course being on the school board. And actually, a couple of my questions were already answered by Councilmember Davis. I actually want to give a huge kudos to Councilmember Davis because she has been instrumental in making sure we stay on track with the Children and Youth Services Master Plan. And she already actually asked 3 of my questions. So good job, Chairwoman. But I do have more, and forgive me if they're going to be long. But first of all, I want to thank staff for all the work that you do, right? And we saw it in the memo where we are trying to not operate in silos when it comes to dealing with youth and children, right? Because when our departments and nonprofit partners and other non-government partners operate in silos, our youth and children fall through the crack, right? And we all know that, cradle to college or cradle to career. I have a new one since many of us use youth services in the city, cradle to council. That's a good one. Cradle to council, because I can assure you, me, Peter, and Domingo use the youth services for the city of San Jose, and that's why we're here, right? Because we were able to stay away from gangs and drugs and reform ourselves and now be able to serve our youth on the city council. But regardless, the questions that I have are few, but I wanna ask this question. When we were out in the Spanish-speaking community or the Vietnamese community or the Tagalog community, these focus groups, were they primarily focused on that language, or did we have translation?
We did a couple of things. So some of them were led just in their native language, and in some of them we had interpreters. It kind of depended on if we had, for example, like a mixed population, then we would use an interpreter. If it was just a Spanish-speaking parents, for example, then we did it just in Spanish.
Okay, perfect.
And then the material was also in Spanish.
And same thing with Vietnamese, same thing with Tagalog.
Yes.
Same thing with Cambodian.
Yeah.
Obviously, right? Okay, so that's a good one. And I'm so glad that Councilmember Davis brought up the point that we are going to have another joint session with our Board of Supervisors when it comes to youth and children, because we can't do it alone. Right. Obviously, we can't do it alone. So I remember leaving right before this master plan was voted on. I left City Hall for SJDA. So where are we at with potentially having, because I think that's what it had been mentioned right before I left, but thank goodness I sit on this committee. Whatever happened to our conversation regarding creating a director of like children and youth services for our city? I know that we have, and I bring that up because we all know that we have Omar Passons, right? He's the director of homeless services now, right? And the statistic that we just saw on folks jailed in our zip code are the same zip codes that we've all been seeing since we have been in this game, right? And I can assure you, of all the money I have in my pockets or in my bank account, because I don't carry cash anymore, and all the money that you have, I can assure you that if we were to survey our thousands of unhoused residents in the city of San Jose, they would come from these zip codes. Because we underinvested in these zip codes for the past 50 years, right? And so when I see that 25% of youth who are homeless come from these zip codes as well, it's very concerning. It's very scary, right? And so, now we're dealing with, we're literally now dealing with our unhoused because we didn't invest in children and youth 25 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it was, right? And so, so with that, I want to know, I know that we have Omar Passons for the director of, homeless services. What's going on with potentially having a director of youth and children's services for our city?
Yeah, Councilmember, I'll take that one. So when this idea first was presented, it was presented in the context of the development of an office. And at that time, I think we collectively agreed, look, let's do the deep dive and engage the community and really define the issues, define kind of what we're trying to solve for. And then let that kind of inform any future establishment of whether it's additional resources, an office, or whatever the structure is. And so that's the path that we've taken. I think since that time, we've been engaged in the development of this plan, and it's been quite an eye-opener because I don't think none of us are surprised by the findings, but what we're able to do is actually validate the findings, right? Here in our city, San Jose, is to really take a look at, look, this is what we're trying to solve for. And what you said around the homeless issue, right? This is like reverse mapping, towards that, and that's exactly the intent of this. I do think that as we come forward with the final strategic plan, and as we're able to show that as Laura said earlier, it's going to take more than the city to invest. It's going to take the county. It's going to take other stakeholders, nonprofit community, and everyone else. That I think that we are going to find that there is going to be a need for somebody to really kind of help navigate that system, right? Because it doesn't just happen on its own. So I think one of the conversations we're going to need to have is what structure do we need to put in place to enable the implementation and execution of this work? And I think that's still to be determined. But our hope is that as we present this, that'll kind of help formulate some recommendations going forward. Is it an office? Is it additional staffing? We don't know that just yet, but okay. We think we'll have a better sense once we're done.
Great. So it's definitely not off the table.
That's right.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. Thank you so much, Angel. I have a couple more questions. I actually been approached more than a few times where parents who have, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, so I don't want to offend our kiddos, children who are deaf. They feel that the city is not listening to them. They feel that there's not enough services with children who need ALS, American Sign Language, ASL. And so what are we doing for children and youth who are deaf in our community?
That hasn't come up specifically, but what we have done, and again, trying to be very intentional, is that San Andreas Regional Center that provides a lot of support for families and caregivers with children with special needs and developmental delays have been involved from the very beginning in this process. And so we've been able to develop that partnership. Also, Rania Mashin from the city manager's office, a developmental officer, has also been pretty involved. So I don't know that we have a specific support in place to address that, but we are working collectively to make sure that we are consistently communicating about how do we respond to those types of supports and requests by community. We do have Jeremy here, who supports our therapeutic specialists who also provide resources and supports to families with children with special needs and developmental delays. So I don't know if, Jeremy, you have anything to add.
Yeah, Jeremy Schaffner, Recreation Superintendent, Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services. One of the areas that we also do support is inclusion services, and not only from an ASL.
Jeremy, if you can get closer to the mic, I'm sorry.
I apologize, getting used to the new mics. As a result of what we are, some of our work that we're doing, not only as a result of the Youth Master Plan, but also in work with Rania, the Disability Affairs, is that we're working to identify resources as we identify those within our inclusion efforts. And these inclusion efforts go throughout our department with all the services within parks, recreation, camps, and the services we offer. We do receive requests on ASL. We'll work to support those requests through translation services, support, and we are looking for additional resources that continue those efforts. So while we don't have the exact model right now, it is being worked on, it has been identified, and we're working with Laura's team to further enhance those.
Okay, great. And before I ask my last question, so our city employees who work with our children at the youth centers, are they trained to learn ASL?
So many of our part-time recreation leaders, no, they do not have ASL. We work with our staff to see about those that do have those skill sets. In addition, one of our efforts is to actually go about and looking at partnering with local schools who have those resources, such as ASL clubs where students can potentially come in. So that's something we're exploring. Very early stages, so I'm letting on to something we're working on. But typically our rec leader staff will engage our inclusion specialist who will come out and do observations to evaluate potential ways that we can support the clients with continued resources, also support them in potentially looking at resources through partners like San Andreas or other resources that they may have access to but are not aware of.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, by the way. I'll relay it to the constituents who reached out to me. The last question, and sorry if I'm taking forever, but this is super important. The last question is, I know that we have $625,000 left in ARP monies. How is that going to be spent for this master plan?
Yeah, Councilman, what we did is we intentionally reserved, so we didn't expend the entire $10.5 billion of ARP that we immediately kind of got out to high-need areas. We did reserve that allocation. When we come forward with the master plan, we are going to be recommending the distribution of that remaining funding. And so we're as a way to kind of just catalyze this. So you'll see some recommendations along with the plan.
Okay, great. Awesome. And then move to approve item D1. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I want to thank staff for this extremely important work and absolutely difficult work as well. Essentially, what you are doing is reversing years of systemic inequity within our city of San Jose. Just as we are sitting here today, there was conversations before the Brown Act, before we were forced to have all our conversations out in public, in back rooms to intentionally put our immigrant community, put our Latino community, put our working class community in these zip codes, right? It's not that in my zip code, our students are less smart than someone on the other side. It's not that, I saw the term Latino, Latinx. We're not less intelligent than other races. There was intentional decisions by individuals, whether it was in the positions we are in today, whether it was people in the state legislature in the past, people blockbusting within the real estate industry that essentially shepherded Latinos, immigrant communities, working class families in this area. And it's the reason why we have these results today. The reason why we're seeing our youth fill juvenile hall or prison, and the reason why the homeless epidemic is where it is now. And if we don't essentially solve this, we will just continue to waste taxpayer dollars on incarcerating our youth, wasting tax dollars because our youth aren't being provided the skills to get a job. So, then we have to help them with food stamps. The reason why we have all the wealth inequality is because our youth are starting behind other individuals. And I think it's important to say that, because as I'm looking at these zip codes and I'm seeing, Latino, Latinx, it's hard to see that. It's hard to see that as myself, because I know we are just as smart as anybody else, but it was intentionally, the chessboard was intentionally put this way to put our community behind others. And I also very much support the concept of blue zones. I think that's great. I think that's something we need to explore, because as these decisions of how they've corralled all these communities together, as I walk around my neighborhoods, I see liquor store, smoke shop, all these detrimental businesses that are essentially preying on our communities of color and our working class families. So it's important that we are intentional with making sure that fresh food, and other sort of resources are available. It's by design that we see diabetes in communities of color, high blood pressure, all that stuff was intentional. So we're going to have to be intentional with how we reverse that. And that's what I see really this plan in doing, because at the end of the day, it's much more better for our city to spend money on this than it is to spend money on incarcerating our youth or any other sort of way of criminalizing them. We have to reach them, because if we don't service them today, they're going to be the ones who are going to be holding up liquor stores or doing those sort of activities. But in essence, it's because our city failed them, and I'm comfortable with saying that our government has failed the youth within our city. Given that it's going to be really expensive to do all this, right? And I know Project Hope's great, Clean Slate, all these programs are essential. That's what helped me. But I also know, like, every time there's a new opportunity zone, with the word that they're using instead of hotspot now, right? Then another hotspot is lost, or another opportunity zone is lost. So it's like we move the services over there, and then things get worse in that area. So are we thinking about ways in which we could access grants? Are we talking with the state legislature on the need to essentially fund more of these services?
Yeah, Councilmember, you're asking the multi-million-dollar question because you're absolutely right. This will cost money. This will require resources. It also, I think, will require us as a city collectively to call the question on whether or not we want to prioritize children, youth, and families. There's a lot of rhetoric and talk about serving children, youth, and families, but I think the true test is going to be what are we willing to do? Now, having said that, we also have to do this in the context of competing interest and a very tight budget. So I also want to be cognizant of that. But to that end, yes, I think we're going to have to look internally around where does this fall in our city of San Jose priority and how we want to fund. So that's kind of one question that still needs to be answered. And the other one has to do is how do we leverage the momentum of this work through community philanthropy, local businesses, especially high-tech Silicon Valley. We've had a number of conversations with different businesses, and a common statement that I make to them is that Silicon Valley could easily be 2,000 miles away, because for many of our youth, it's a pipe dream, right? And so we got to find a way, as in the spirit of talking about pathways, is to really clearly delineate these pathways that go from a 95122 zip code to a company that is paying well in Silicon Valley. And not that that's the only pathway, but there's, that pathway is not laid out as clearly. So those are the questions. We are arranging meetings with several community philanthropy foundations, with the aim of trying to engage them to come up with some seed money that we could also help catalyze this, because there's great momentum from community. I think to the extent, I think the city has demonstrated our intentional commitment to really focus in on better coordinating interdepartmentally. You'll see the library here, you see Parks and Rec, you see a number of different departments that internally back office, we're already kind of like, connecting the dots, right? but we are going to need to engage additional outside resources to help fund this. I think Councilmember Torres mentioned the county earlier. We've had very, candid conversations with the county around the need to really kind of clarify roles and also clarify funding that actually comes into the city as well, right? So all those things are part of the overarching strategy. We do need to figure out, we need to make sure that we develop a long-term sustainability plan. Otherwise, this just becomes nice happy talk and doesn't get done. So that definitely is one of the challenges that we've taken on. And then lastly, I would say, from a kind of return on investment standpoint, we're going to have to also be very clear and intentional about how we measure progress, because at the end of the day, like any investor, they're going to want to know, if I'm going to put money into this, how do we know we're getting the results? And so we're going to have to really dial in on a good performance metric system where we could be able to report whether or not we're making progress. And so a lot of work to be done, but this is kind of the conduit to kind of move us in that direction. If we do this right, it can be pretty transformative.
No, I appreciate that. And my colleague also mentioned cradle to career, and you also mentioned that, we have Silicon Valley here, but for the zip codes that we represent, it might as well be in another state. I didn't even know about what Silicon Valley was until I went through a program called Year Up that took families from East San Jose, that took families from downtown Southeast San Jose to these work environments and show that they could be successful. But in many cases, they're not looking at our community colleges to hire. They're not looking at our high schools. They don't see our youth as viable employment. What are we going to do? Because we can invest as much as we want into these programs, but if our youth aren't able to access the career part of career to cradle to career, that they're going to still be reliant on government assistance, affordable housing, and we're going to still be stuck in this cycle. Is there any possible way? Are we going to convene employers? Are we going to set up some sort of plan to make sure that whether it's our schools or our community colleges or our SJSU are actually teaching the skills that these companies want to hire from, and then changing the perception that employers have of our youth in these zip codes? People could interpret that as however they want, or the talent that exists here in San Jose.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We definitely need to do that, and it's easier said than done. If you think about it, the number one response we get from, say, whether it's a grant or a request for money or investment from the private sector is typically sounds something like this. We don't want to just throw money away. We want to invest into a plan. Well, we're kind of calling that question. We're coming up with this plan, and we're saying now we need you to invest, because the private sector will be a recipient of this, right? And whether you look at this work from the standpoint of doing what's right morally, or from what's right by people, or whether you just look at it straightly from a money economic development perspective, the answer still takes you to the same place, which is this is an avenue to accomplish both, right? And so part of this, and part of the fierce conversation we need to have with our stakeholders is are you willing to invest? It's one thing to kind of use sound bites to talk about children, youth, and because I think we have a lot of sound bites out there, but it's the question we need to call is, what are we willing to invest in, right? And it's not just money, although money is a big part of it. It's also time and resources, right? It's people that are taking the time to mentor folks in these very zip codes that you mentioned, so that we bridge that gap. Right, and I think what we'll find by doing that is that people will be pretty surprised about just how many sharp people are actually on the east side of 101 that have been overlooked for so many years, right? And
I think maybe it may make sense to reach out to Year Up. They're an organization that has bridged this gap. Their success rate is in the 80 percentile of people getting jobs at Google, Facebook. May make sense to connect them to Work the Future, or Work the Future learn about what they're doing, because they've been able to change this perception of our youth in the workplace. And it's not asking for handouts, because at the end of the day, we have not been we've been keeping up with essentially the corporate side of economic development, but not the workforce part of economic. That's why we have the visa programs and all that stuff, because our youth don't have those skills. So we need to connect that gap and build like a brain trust and figure out how to do it. And then finally, I just want to comment, I'm very much supportive of the collaboration. I saw like, there was like a diagram of all the different organizations. What people don't realize is like, when youth are having a hard time in school, there's issues with maybe the parent just died. Maybe they're having an issue with housing. The McKinney-Vento population of houseless students continues to rise here in the city of San Jose. Maybe they're immigrants. Maybe they're all sharing one room, and the kid has people playing TV and all this stuff going on. So there's so many factors that go into a life. It's not just like a child's dumb. It's like there's factors that get in the way of a youth's ability to excel. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to, sorry for talking too long, but appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Candelas.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman. You know, I appreciate my colleagues' comments, especially, you know, especially on the points on, you know, the hot spots, but I'll get into that in a bit. I want to start off thanking Laura for your presentation and the staff. I know the significance of this work and definitely appreciate the collaboration. I also want to thank our chair. Councilmember Davis has been instrumental with the blue zones and the activation, because creating healthier communities will lead to better health outcomes, will lead to stronger and better communities. I believe that wholeheartedly, and believe integrating that into our children and youth master plan is uplifting. And you know, while I think it's important to prioritize residents, you know, the memorandum said it best. Over the years, we as a city have moved tremendously. We've moved mountains on issues, important issues like homelessness, safety, blight, economic development through different policies, programs, and investments. But you know, it is equally important, and I'm quoting from the report, to elevate the needs of children and youth to that same degree that we had for the last couple of years, because you see the numbers, you see the data, black and white, clear as day. You have anecdotal stories of my colleagues on here on the dais, so the community sees that, and I cannot say that enough, that you know, this is important work that we're doing, and I guess my question is pertaining to the sourcing of the $350,000 to $550,000. Walk me through what does that mean, sourcing of funds through the county, private, public, health systems? What does that look like? So are we going to like cobble funds from other group?
Is this around the blue zones? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, well, no, it's with regards to the last page of the memorandum. There is, in addition to the 150,000.
Yes, so that's for the Blue Zones assessment.
Okay.
And that's what Christine in my office is spearheading that work.
Okay.
So we have asked the county for $150,000 to match our $150,000.
Gotcha.
And then we've gone out to the health trust and also some employers in the community, as well as the health systems in the community, to backfill the rest of that, to
Gotcha.
ensure that we
Okay.
have an assessment that starts out with a broad level of support in the community to move forward.
Okay, no, that's excellent, and thank you for bridging that, because I heard it in the beginning. I was like, okay, that's great, and then we have about 650 left to implement some of the recommendations when we come to council in the winter, right? So that is going to be in addition to the 650 thousand that we have left or appropriated through ARP, correct?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome. Great work on that, Chairwoman Davis. I'm telling you, I'm a fan. I love it. And so, okay, so now I'll shift over to my first question. My first question, pertaining to the hot spot shifts and potentially, you know, the impact we have, because you know these zip codes, we have six zip codes that were identified. And specifically, you know, 95122 in my district, the Welch Park neighborhood, and you know, as we create, you know, Project Hope sites, empower our communities, I worry that we are too quick to just say, okay, we're good, and shift our attention to a different neighborhood, likely through justifiable means, but at what cost to the neighbors who feel abandoned by the city because they don't have that support. And a lot of these communities are historically disenfranchised, disadvantaged. And so maybe staff's take on the decision-making process of how a shifting of a hotspot works, to maybe enlighten me a little bit.
I think you're.
Or hotspot, sorry, whatever we're calling it nowadays, sorry.
Opportunity neighborhoods.
Opportunity neighbors, and the decision-making process behind that.
Yeah, you know, man, you guys keep raising some key questions because all these questions kind of point back to kind of the root causes, right? And we know that even whether it's Project Hope or whether it's you name the program that that we provide, Viva Park, you name it. In some ways, it's a little bit of a Band-Aid. In some ways, it's a little bit of a, hey, let's just kind of stop the bleeding. Let's just kind of, make things a little bit better. But the reality is that things aren't going to really change long-term until we start addressing root causes, right? So to that end, one of the things, and we'll kind of give you a little bit of a glimpse of when we come back to you all with the final product is, right now we're exploring the possibility of identifying 2 pilot locations in our city. Where we'll be able to take these recommendations and take these, there's some nice diagrams in there around network coordination and collaboration with city, county, and all other partners, where we actually take that and we operationalize them in those areas using existing resources, right? There's already money that the county has deployed for behavioral health, mental health. There's already programs that you all have approved through Parks and Rec and the library and so forth. Starting with what we have, and then executing on this through a pilot, measuring performance, and then also identifying where the gaps are. Because even with that, once we do those overlays, I'm sure we're going to find some additional gaps. And it's those gaps that we're going to try to fund towards, right? The missing variable in this equation is how long does that investment need to be? And the reality is that it's probably going to be a long-term investment. It would probably be a 5-10-year investment. But the logical model or the theory of change is that if we do our jobs right and we coordinate and we're building community capacity, so this isn't just the city, the county doing something for neighborhoods, but it's city, county working with neighborhoods, building capacity, that over time then you get kind of this dividend return, right, of change. That's kind of the thinking right now. But at the end of the day, our hope is that we could then learn from those 2 pilot sites and then scale this citywide. That's the thinking right now. We still got to kind of vet that a little bit more, but that's our preliminary thinking.
Okay, no, that's great. And I guess, critical to that, my point was, I would hope that when we discuss where these pilot places are set to occur, they happen with the administration, but also with a council office or the respective council office that would be negatively or positively, hopefully, impacted by this. And that's my request to the administration for not just the pilot program you spoke of, but which sites we select and how the hotspots and or priority or opportunity neighborhoods are working and are potentially thinking about shifting to another neighborhood. So that's my request. Thank you. Thanks again for staff for the report. And I'll yield anytime if I have any back to you.
You do. You're the only one who didn't go over yet. Councilmember Dwan.
I'll try not to go over. Thank you very much, staff. Thank you for the great work. I just got a few questions regarding sign languages interpreter. Now, my understanding that under the federal laws, under 88 Act, that should be a prioritization where a person who is having hearing loss or unable to hear should have an interpreter at school or any meeting, even here at City Council. And I was very disappointed that we don't have some type of interpreter here where other city does automatically. So how do we go about to make sure this happen?
Councilor Doan, that's a great question. That's something we're actually working through with our partners in the city manager's office with Rania Mohsen. We're working together collaboratively on that. In many cases, we work to identify resources within our recreation programs that typically are based off of volunteers because we don't typically have the resource to pay for the ASL. We're working on that component with Rania so that we can, to your point, have this more readily available, have a consistent resource. That's something we are working on, but it does require a resource to support that.
A lot of resource from the hearing deficit from Maloney College is actually a pretty large school for the hearing impairment. Now, if we don't do something soon, eventually, I believe we will violating the federal laws and we're going to get sued. So I prefer that we work on this and even for the youth, right? Especially when they start out. If they feel that they're being neglected, that's not okay.
Absolutely, and if I may also add, that is a pilot that we're actually working on currently that we were brought to our attention that some of our local high schools actually have ASL clubs, and working with those local high schools to engage the high schoolers as volunteers that could also support them in achieving their volunteer service hours within the school and utilizing them within our programs that would also not only meet their volunteer hours, but then it would also support them in real life scenarios with experience that could then grow into other opportunities as they progress past high school. So we are exploring that opportunity, which would be much more of a quicker timeline, I'll say.
One of my bigger concern is that 58% of Latinx, and then 58% of the others are be able to achieve a high school diploma. To me, we're failing these young people. I don't look at the percentage that success. I'm looking at the percentage that we left behind. And I've always based a model with the military. We don't leave anyone behind, especially our youth. I understand that, yes, they got the theological needs, their shelter and security. But in order to build their future, education is the key. And how do we pair and get young people from starting from high school in order to understand what their needs in education in order to work for many different companies that within our realm here. We are the Silicon Valley. We have the resource, we have the intelligence, but yet we fail our kids. And I feel that our education alone, we have support, but our education have failed our kids because why? Our kids, our young adults are not able to compete globally. For that matter, we barely be able to compete within this county. I think we need to do so much more on not only education, but inspire and empower them that they can do anything they want. I came here as an immigrant, and I've learned and took the opportunity to grow, and I look back, I go, these kids are born here. Why aren't they have that ability to do, or at least the support to be successful? And that's befuddled me quite a bit, because I've seen, when I go on emergency call or emergency alarm system, where big companies, it comes out. And what I see is a lot of overseas engineers and workers and so on. And it disappoints me because we have enormous amount of resource, we have enormous amount of intelligence here, and yet we can't put our children and our adults, young adults, into these positions. So what are your plan somewhere to use some of this funding in order to move these kids from barely understanding, the STEM into engineering, into software engineer, or whatever other field?
I think that's the collective us response, right? It takes everyone, because any one of us can engage with a young person that's disconnected from school for whatever reason, right? maybe they don't have a place to sleep, or maybe their parents just aren't around for whatever reason, or maybe that child has been told consistently that they have no value, that they're going to end up in prison anyways, right? Or that they're not smart because they don't know how to write a paper. And so it's a complex issue, complex challenges, and it's, again, really thinking about the collective us in whatever point that child enters, whether it's a community center or a library or your neighbor that comes to your door. You know, how can we best support them? And how do we support our staff also to be able to support that child, to be able to identify if they see that that child is coming for a gym basketball game, and they notice that that child then goes to their car after the game, so that that staff person has the capacity to recognize that there's something wrong, right? That that child is going through something, and then having the resources to be able to connect that child and that family to those resources. So our goal is that every child feels empowered, that they feel valued, and I think for me, I'm talking personally, I think is having the hope and vision that they can be somebody. And it may look differently for everyone, right? Not everyone wants to be an engineer. We may have some of these youth who can be great mechanic or artists or performers or writers, a council member. And so, but how do we give them that vision that they can accomplish their dreams? And so I want to say that the Children and Youth Services Master Plan is not going to be the end-all be-all. It's not a magic pill, but what I do hope is that it'll provide a framework and a strategy of how do we work together more effectively, be more responsive, and really think about the situation that our young people experience every day. Many of us probably can't even imagine what they're going through, but how do we accept them for who they are and give them the resources and supports and the hope that they can do better and be a positive person in our community. And Angel, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I'll say amen. Can you hear me there? Okay. I think I used a term previously, opportunity neighborhoods, and I think it's priority neighborhoods. So I just want to correct the record and thank staff for keeping me honest. And then council member, to your question around ASL, I was also reminded by staff that is also being evaluated and assessed through the ASL audit that's taking place. So hopefully we could kind of make some traction with those two.
Thank you.
Nothing else to add, Laura. I think you hit it right on the money.
I just like to add, I like to see in your next master plan status report, so when you have the percentage, you got 58% Latino X and this, but I like to see the other percentage to break down, right? Including the 25% of our residents in all those zip code, but I don't know which ethnicity in there and which group that needs the help. I mean, you lump sum. I appreciate that you can break that down, because it help us identify where the needs are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank all my colleagues for their discussion. I know and Laura for your patience. This is such an important body of work that I'm glad we had this time to have a really fulsome discussion about it, and that's why my colleagues all have so many questions for you. And I appreciate you coming back here for the status report. So we will next discuss this hopefully at a joint city-county committee meeting before we bring this back to council and have the full the vote on the final plan. And but for now, we will vote on the motion on the floor.
Does it have to be in the motion?
We did, yeah. All right, that motion passes unanimously, and we will move on to item D2, the Neighborhood Center Partner Program Annual Report. I think, Pauline, are you kicking us off?
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Pauline Keck with PRNS. I am the Parks, Recreation, and Facilities Supervisor for the Neighborhood Center Partner Program. As you all know, we love our acronyms, so you'll hear me refer to it as NCPP. So I'll be presenting on the annual NCPP update today with Petra Ruggiero, Program Manager here. Alrighty, so back in 2008, the city was facing budgetary challenges and could no longer operate these neighborhood centers. Instead of closing them, the city and council took a step towards preserving the safety and accessibility of these centers by passing Council Policy 7-12, the reuse policy. Policy 7-12 governs the program, which allows agencies access to these neighborhood centers at no cost in exchange for free or low-cost services to the community. Partners need to apply and qualify through a request for qualifications in order to provide these services. The most recent RFQ was released in 2021. In 2018, the program was audited, and as a result, the department rebranded the program to recognize that the strength of the program is determined by our community-based partners in our neighborhood centers. Hence, the name changed from the reuse program to the Neighborhood Center Partner Program. Neighborhood centers differ from our hub community centers in that our hubs are fully staffed and funded to provide a wide range of city programs. Neighborhood centers are operated by our nonprofit partners and offer more focused, limited level of services in comparison to the hubs. Some neighborhood centers have hybrid operations, and that's where programs and services at those locations are operated by a partner and supplemented by some city programming. Some examples of our hubs, we typically have one per council district, are like Mayfair Community Center and Willow Glen Community Center. And then some of our neighborhood center partner program sites that have hybrid operations are like Alum Rock Youth Center, and that's where we have Boys and Girls Club as our partner, and they provide after-school programs. And then the city also supplements with having teen programs. So if you take a look at this side, you see that we currently have 29 NCPP sites. Of those 29 sites, we have 24 total active sites that are operated by PRNS and our partners. This could be any combination of either being, having just the city at these sites, or just our partners at these sites, or a combination, like I said, of our hybrid operations. And if we're just looking at just our partner impacts, we have 14 sites that are operated by 11 partners and their subcontractors. Some partners operate out of multiple sites. For example, we have Boys and Girls Club at Alviso, Alum Rock, and Edenville. And then we have single sites that are operated by multiple partners, for example, like the Vietnamese American Cultural Center, where we have ICANN and Vivo. So next slide. So as a result of the audit recommendations and the rebrand of the program, the department created these 5 priorities and goals to focus on accessibility and transparency. So the first one is to maintain safe, quality facilities for neighborhood services. The second, to ensure timely, transparent processes for operator selection. The third, to establish consistent enforcement accountability standards and metrics. The fourth, to improve community access and knowledge of activities. And the fifth, to increase the number of providers and services in disadvantaged communities. Next slide. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the program was audited in 2018. 19 recommendations were made for the program. Those recommendations focused on 4 findings around facility level data, contract compliance, staff efficiency, and transparency. At the time this report was submitted, the department had implemented 16 of those 19 recommendations, with 3 being partly implemented. We were actually just recently notified by the auditor that we just closed out an additional recommendation, bringing the new total to 17 implemented recommendations with 2 partly implemented. The department expects to close out the following 2 recommendations by December 2023, so basically the end of this year. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Petra.
Turn my mic on. Thanks, Pauline. Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Petra Aguero, and I'm a Program Manager with Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services, and my team and I are responsible for the administrative functions for Neighborhood Center Partner Program, so the request for qualification process and contract management. So as Pauline mentioned, we do partner with currently 11 agencies who provide a number of services at the 14 neighborhood centers, and our team oversees the monitoring and compliance of these contracts for the partners. So we collect mid-year and end-of-year reports that include, as you see on the slide, performance measure results, monthly calendars that include the number of services and the times of those activities at each center, and the level of service. And we also collect narrative, financial, and demographic information in those mid-year and end-of-year reports. And so through the data and the qualitative information collected in these reports, we're able to evaluate agencies' overall performance in delivering these contracted services. We can evaluate the level of service that is going out to the communities and how well these agencies are meeting those outcomes. So here, again, in looking at the audit recommendations and how we can better monitor the contracted services and the agency's performance, we did make some enhancements initially in reporting requirements, and that included revisions of some of the existing forms, like the narrative report. We also added some new reporting requirements, financial report, demographic report, and all of those were outlined in the RFQ document. So as we began to work with the agencies in the first year of the RFQ period, and we started to implement the revamped reporting requirements, we received feedback from a few agencies on the level of detail that we were requiring, the number of forms, and the amount of time that it took them to complete the report. So we continued to meet with agencies to better understand their system for collecting and tracking the data that we were looking for, and some of the challenges that they were experiencing with our reporting process. So through these feedback sessions, our team was able to go back and make changes to the forms. We changed the frequency in which we were requiring them to submit. We were able to simplify and condense some of those forms into one workbook. And so, for example, if you see on the slide there, we were able to change some of the requirements from mid-year and end-of-year to just one time in the year at the end for the end-of-year report. We were able to reduce some of the financial items that we were collecting. And again, I mentioned we were also able to consolidate some of the forms. And so that, and the second column outlines those changes that we were able to do to the reporting requirements. In this next slide, here are the total direct service hours that were provided. Well, first that you have the contracted column for the partners, and then you have the total hours that were provided by the partners and the city staff programs. So if you see for the NCP providers, the contracted amount was the $28,632, and this is based on the 30.1 direct service hours per week, which is outlined in the RFQ. So as you see, our partners exceeded it. They completed a total of 31,080 hours, which is great. I do want to point out, though, that although they exceeded the overall target or the overall projection in their contracts, we did find that some of the agencies at the smaller centers or agencies that have smaller space to program were experiencing shortfalls. So, and this is based again on that minimum requirement of the 30 hours, the direct 30 hours per week. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and reevaluate this requirement by looking at what is the available space within that center to really optimize the use of that facility, first of all, but also holding agencies accountable for a requirement that better matches the capacity of that center that they're at. So this next slide, we have a total of, we served a total of 9,835 unduplicated participants through the partner programs and city staff programs. I would like to point out that if you looked at the previous slide, the participants served by city staff program is disproportionate to the total hours served. You have more participants served in city staff programs, and this is mainly due to larger special events and senior nutrition programs that are staffed by city programs. So I'll turn it over to Pauline.
Yeah, thank you, Petra. So I just wanted to give you kind of a snapshot of some of the programs that our partners have been providing out of our neighborhood centers. If you take a look from the top left corner, we're going to go clockwise. This is at the Vietnamese American Cultural Center. It's ICANN Storytime program. And then to the right, this is at the Rainbow Community Center. It's the Ethiopian Community Services. They do an Amharic language class. Bottom corner, this is ICANN's First 5 program. It's kids learning how to make measurements so they can make like Play-Doh and things like that. And then the bottom left corner is Vivo, also at the Vietnamese American Cultural Center, and this is an adult ESL class. Next slide. Again, top left corner, this is the San Jose Astronomical Association out of our Hoagie Park Community Center. This is their telescope program. And then to the right, we have Chopsticks Alley Art. This is a senior art class over at the Olander Community Center. Bottom right corner, also at Hoagie, this is American Youth Shakespeare, a snapshot of a play. And then the left corner, we have Starting Arts, also at Olander. And this is a showcase of their 101 Dalmatians play. And then the top left corner again, we have Ethiopian Community Services at Rainbow. This is their Women's Empowerment Support Group. And then next photo, they have a senior nutrition kind of game time social time for seniors. And then the right corner, you'll see it's Boys and Girls Club. They have a Vision to Learn program where they have free eye exams by an optometrist, and the kids get free glasses as well. Bottom corner, and the photo next to that, they did go on a field trip to the Tech Museum, and then a snapshot of their summer robotics program. And then finally, the left bottom corner, we have the Assyrian American Association of San Jose operating out of the Almaden Winery. Here's a photo of their women's social group.
Okay, so some of the next steps that we'll be working on is in this next year, we'll be looking to conduct another RFQ to refresh the current qualified pool and hopefully bring in some new providers. With that, we're also looking at how we can simplify some of the requirements that are outlined in the RFQ. We are looking at, like I mentioned earlier, reevaluating the requirement for direct service hours so it aligns better with the capacity of that specific center and that space. We will continue to work with our partners to get feedback on the monitoring or reporting requirements to determine what is appropriate and what allows us to continue to collect the data in order to report out on outcomes, but also working with the agencies and their ability to complete those reports. And then we'll continue to make progress on those 2 open audit items, and we anticipate to complete those by December 2023. So that concludes our presentation, and we're available for questions.
Thank you. We'll go to public comment first.
We have one speaker card from Blair Beekman. You can make your way down to the podium. You will have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, this is Blair Beekman here. This is an item that's more about data collection and reporting and some best practices in those terms. I hope I can offer just a few reminders of community center best practices that I think are important that have been kind of fallen by the wayside a bit in recent years and that relate to the items on today's agenda. With children and youth services, I think there's a commitment to the new Children's Bill of Rights things that should be thought of as really important. Tech accessibility is really important in the Children's Bill of Rights things. For community centers to be able to facilitate tech accessibility for both youth and for seniors that I first mentioned. I think we don't do enough programs for seniors at community centers anymore, is my understanding. Just a reminder of the importance of those good things, and of course the work I do with tech accountability really helps lend itself to the concepts of better tech accessibility overall, and it's just a process of learning all of that together, building that together. Reminders at this time. Thanks a lot for this item.
Thank you. We will now go to Zoom.
Paul?
We're not able to hear you, Paul.
Paul, you're unmuted. It's not connecting back to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Torres.
Thank you for that presentation, and thank you actually for all the questions and the concerns that I had before this committee. So I have you've answered some of my questions offline when I saw what was on the agenda for NSC. But for my colleagues on this committee, I have a neighborhood center that has been sitting vacant for 2 years because that organization could no longer operate. It went bust, went bankrupt, ghosted the city, whatever happened. And it's in it's in a former hotspot, right? Which is North Side, right? It's North Side's become gentrified, and so now we have multi-million-dollar homes. But however, there's still underlying issues with youth violence in that neighborhood, right? And we all know that, just like my colleagues mentioned, when we focus too much on one neighborhood, the other, we ignore the other neighborhood, and tensions rise. So, for my question, I have 2 questions. My first question is, and I think you mentioned it. I'm sorry, you did mention it in the presentation. But our RFQ process, we're going from 9 years to 3 years, right?
So the current qualified list is for 9 years. We are looking at what is the term for the next RFQ, and so we haven't finalized that quite yet. So we're looking at, in the next term, what is appropriate and what's going to work best for the programs and for those applicants.
Okay, no, great. So I think this is really important that you're all are looking into cutting the years of an RFQ process, because right now, as of right now, it's 9 years. I wholeheartedly believe that's too long, right? Again, I have Paquesto in my neighborhood. And with the uncertainty of the economy, we all know there's nonprofits that come and go, leadership changes, and all that, stuff that we can't control, right? And so I wholeheartedly believe that we need to cut down on 9 years to potentially 3 or 4 years, because now we can't get anybody at Paquesto because the RFP process doesn't open up for another year and a half, I believe, right? And so I hope that we look at that and make sure that it's no longer 9 years or how many years it is, but it's a shorter time period.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the last RFQ that was conducted qualified those agencies for a 9-year period. But we are planning to do a new RFQ that will then refresh a list, so anybody that applies and qualifies will be qualified for whatever term is included in that RFQ. So say we release something next year, their qualification would start as soon as we release that notice of award or notice of qualification. So the 9-year doesn't prevent any new agencies coming on board if we run another RFQ.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, that does make sense. So my question should be, and maybe we can take this offline. My question is, how do we prevent another Paquesto Little Center from being empty for the next 2 years? If a nonprofit, let's just say next year we open it up and that an organization goes bankrupt, what can we do as a city to make sure that another nonprofit comes in to take over those programs once that nonprofit can no longer do their programming, their work, their whatever they're supposed to do?
So I think creating a big bench, running, processes where we include newer agencies, and would be one idea is how to have someone that is ready to go into a center like Paquesto. So having agencies on a qualified list that have the ability to run program at a site like that, I think we look at prioritize what types of programs that we want in specific areas of San Jose, and that could be outlined in an RFQ process. So if that is a priority for us and we have programming that we want at a certain location, we would outline that in the
cool.
RFQ process.
Yeah, and I just don't want to single out Paquesto, because we need to be, like I said, with the uncertainty of our economy, we need to have something in place in case it happens in other neighborhood centers. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen, all our nonprofits are going to go bankrupt. We have, amazing nonprofits that know how to raise money and have been doing it for so long and offer some great services. Like, for example, we all know that our Olinder Center was sitting there vacant for a very long time, and Chopsticks Alley came in and hit the ground running, and they have a weekly poetry meeting every Wednesday and have classes going on Saturdays where now it's reignited the fire in that small Olinder community, right? And so thankful for folks like Trami Cronwyn, right? Washington United Youth Center, right? Even way before we became a neighborhood center, this was created, right? The Catholic Charities has always ran Washington United Youth Center, right? So it works. We know that it works, right? So thank you for that, by the way. So and I know that I've been pestering you all regarding Paquesto, and I hope that in the next year we as a city can get somebody in there, because there are more than 3 organizations that have come in and said, we're ready to just give us the keys and we will run a program out of there, Omar. And I'm just like, there's a process. And so, may the best organization win when they apply, right? But hopefully we can work together to make sure that somebody goes into Paquesto. The other one is, I've had small businesses that are not 501c3s. I've had dance groups or arts groups that are not 501c3, nor are they an official group who said, hey, I want to do a fitness program out of the Washington United Youth Center, or I want to do a folklorico group out of Paquesto Park. Is there like a website that our city has, or who can they contact when these organizations that are not really nonprofits want to do subcontracting work for us?
I'm not aware of a website that they can go to, but are you asking how can they get in and start programming?
Yes, like
Okay.
how can they, like, for example, I have and I'm sure you, because he's on Instagram, but Warze Fitness, right? He's literally across the street from Washington United Youth Center. He wants to do like a kickboxing class for them. He doesn't want to charge any money, but he doesn't want the kids to come to his gym. He wants to do it at the youth center, because that's where that's where he wants to meet where the kids are, even though he's literally right across the street. But he wants to go into the youth center and do once a week kickboxing, but he doesn't know quite how to do that.
Okay. So for subcontracting, they could approach the program staff, so Pauline or any one of her team, and in the past we've helped facilitate, but they would need to make the connection to the provider that's already at the center, and we could start facilitating the conversation. So that's one way that they would be able to go in and start programming. I'm not sure if there's other options, Pauline, that you want to speak to.
Yeah, and I'd like to just put it out there that policy 7-12 is not limited to nonprofits. It's actually open to for-profit and not-profits. It's just what they offer has to be kind of nonprofit in nature, not fee generating. Whatever fees they do generate has to just be put back into the program. So they could actually go through the same avenue of going through the RFQ. Second option, like you said, subcontracting with our main provider that's already there on site. Typically, those requests come through me. I can facilitate a conversation with our main provider so they can decide amongst themselves if that's something they want to do. And then obviously our third option is through our city's rentals program that we also operate.
Great, yeah, and thank you so much. That was one of my questions for my colleagues on the board is our city has taken over the rental process for many of these neighborhood centers, and that's a good thing because I heard your concerns on why you did it, and so I wholeheartedly agree with them. They shouldn't be revenue generating sources for some of these nonprofits who are in there, and it allows us to know who's doing what in these centers. So it holds us more accountable. So, and then it says there that I'm out of time. So I think the chairwoman pressed that on purpose, but that's okay. I move to approve item D3.
Additionally, one more item, Councilmember Torres. One fourth option for you for explorers, in addition to contacting Pauline's team, but also to reach out to our community centers. In some cases where we have our local partners who want to volunteer their services, reach out. We can definitely look at seeing about how we can facilitate through our main hubs as well.
Great,
so,
no,
as a
thank
fourth
you.
option.
Thank you, Jeremy. I know I could always count on our PRNS, and it's very interesting to see you in a suit because we worked together for a long time, and it's weird to be in a suit when we're out in our communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Dwan.
I wonder, the city, when you give a nonprofit organization a grant, can we do it like a contractual services where if they complete at 25%, we give them 25%? And then when they finish 50, we'll give them 50, versus it'll eliminate that if they're going to go bankruptcy and take most of the money. Is there a way to eliminate that possibility by doing the contractual agreement? No? Oh, we don't pay them? Okay.
Oh, so actually with our Neighborhood Center Partner Program, all our contracts are non-monetary. It's actually just in exchange for free or low-cost services, they get the facility for free. So there's no money involved in it. I think where Councilmember Torres was getting at is like, how do we keep a robust list so that, let's say, if God forbid we have another pandemic or something, and then people don't make it out of that, organizations, we don't just leave a building completely empty. We have a list that we can go back to, and we say, hey, we would call this now a request for proposals to our qualified list. Here's a building that's empty. How can you operate it for us? So I think that's what the goal is for our program. But all of our contracts are non-monetary, so we're not losing anything in that sense.
Well, thank you for clarification. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Ortiz.
Testing. Okay. I just want to say this. I appreciate your work on this. Our local community centers, neighborhood centers are extremely important to keep our residents active. This conversation is really timely because I was just working with Angel to make sure that we were getting New Hope for Youth into some of the centers, because we have Capitol Park, which is looking like it's going to go into what are we calling it now? Priority neighborhood, yeah. And then we got the Allen Mark Youth Center, which is utilized by the Boys and Girls Club, but it's also good to bring in other organizations to provide services in those areas as well. So just want to thank you for your work. That's the way we bring the services to the community. Not everybody could come down to City Hall. So no, I'm grateful. I appreciate these neighborhood centers. Sounds like Omar has like 10 of them in his district, but that's okay. But no, I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I have one question. Given that there's going to be a new RFQ, these community centers are really neighborhood based, and I think most people who avail themselves of the services at a community center are really living nearby. And so there's a reason for this question, but how are the neighborhood partners designated for each individual community center, and how, I didn't see anything on the priorities and goals slides about being culturally responsive or responsive to neighborhood needs. So can you talk a little bit about that, and if that's not part of the RFQ, can you add it?
Sorry, let me put my speaker on. Yeah, I would have to go through just to make sure it was specifically called out in the RFQ, but I can definitely, thank you for that comment. I think that's really important that if it is not, we will definitely add it to the new RFQ. But I'd have to go through and look to make sure. I know we have it in other processes that we manage with the department, so I just want to specifically make sure it's in this last one. But thank you for that, it's really important.
Yeah, I think it is really important, and I don't know how we can. I saw that the demographics for the programs, it was hard to get that from participants, and so that was something that was changed on the reporting requirements, which I understand. But I've just gotten some feedback in the last few months about Gardner Community Center and that neighborhood partner not being necessarily responsive to what the neighborhood wants to see in their community center, and the kinds of programs are just a mismatch. Even though I think their programming is great, it just doesn't happen to meet the needs of what the priorities of the neighborhood are. And so I don't know how we can, and I'm happy to help facilitate that with our neighborhood associations for our community centers, and I'm sure my colleagues would be as well, but really trying to match the provider to the neighborhood in terms of neighborhood needs, but also being culturally responsive to the neighborhoods.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Polly.
Oh, I'd also like to add that when we did release our RFQ, we actually had 4 neighborhood center partner program priority service areas that they had to meet something under. One of them was actually health and wellness, and it says offer culturally relevant services promoting health and wellness, visual performing arts, physical activities, food security opportunities, and healing and mindfulness. I will make a direct comment regarding Gardner. That was more of like a stopgap, just because we didn't actually get any provider that was interested in that site. So it was kind of just like, we'd rather have some services here than completely nothing at all. But definitely that, when we evaluate, we have panels, and we are looking at demographics of neighborhoods when we are placing people. And, I would say our team is pretty culturally diverse. We have a lot of lived experiences. And we talk to the community, we know kind of what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And we hope, our goal is to place people appropriately. Sometimes that doesn't work out well, but like in this case, the provider is not there no more, and now we're going to look for something more appropriate for the center.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure Diana on my team is is going to be really happy for me to make this next comment, but we are happy to help facilitate that and help go out and help find potential providers for that site, because we are in close contact with the Gardner community and the Gardner Neighborhood Association, as well as the North Willow Glen Neighborhood Association and the Del Mas Park folks who all of which the Gardner Community Center serves. And I think we can help find a provider that would be more appropriate to what the neighborhoods are looking for.
Yeah, we'll definitely note that when we do our outreach for the
Thanks.
RFQ, that each council office will get definitely an outreach packet to include that.
That's great. Thank you so much. With that, I don't see any other requests to speak, so we are ready for the vote. Okay. That item passes unanimously, and we'll move on to item D3. That's the Youth Commission's annual report and work plan. And I think Elizabeth is going to be kicking us off. Okay. Jill's nodding, so.
Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. My name is Megan Malloy. I'm a librarian at Teen HQ at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library, and I have the pleasure of acting as the Youth Commission Coordinator for this year. So I'm going to let the Youth Commissioners take over, introduce themselves, and share with you their work plan for the year.
Good afternoon, Chair, Council members, and staff. My name is Nolan Mascarenas. This is my first year representing District 10, and I have the pleasure of serving on the Youth Commission as Vice Chair and New Outreach Officer. Developed over 50 years ago, the Youth Commission is the official advisory group to the Mayor and City Council, which empowers and encourages youth to be civically engaged through local and citywide events and initiatives. The Youth Commission represents approximately 248,000 youth under age 19 in San Jose, promoting available resources and opportunities, providing equitable access and support to marginalized youth communities, and developing policy recommendations concerning youth. The library department, namely Teen HQ, assumes leadership and management of the San Jose Youth Commission in 2021, aligning with the city's educational and digital strategy. The Youth Commission leads on the values of responsibility, teamwork, empathy, inclusivity, empowerment, and integrity. The Youth Commission is comprised of 11 commissioners, one from each city council district and one citywide, and they work alongside other volunteer youth in their district youth advisory councils, or YACs, to develop policy proposals, host events, and create initiatives to better relay priorities and movements to local public officials.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Thi Leung. This is my first year representing District 4 on the San Jose Youth Commission. The Youth Commission outlined a work plan for the fiscal year 23-24 using the newly revised Municipal Code function, powers, and duties as passed at the City Council meeting this past Tuesday as a framework to empower San Jose youth to have our voices make an impact through advisory comment and recommendation on priorities of youth. Through youth-focused outreach and our lived experiences, the Commission identified priorities such as safe and inclusive opportunities for young people to act on environmental change and exploring topics of safety and support services available to all. The work plan consists of 3 objectives, each with specific actions. The first objective is to submit a recommendation to develop a youth participatory budget program pilot. To achieve this, the Commission will collect youth input through events like citywide summits, launch a citywide survey, and sponsor town halls to determine youth priorities. We'll then share these priorities through policy comments and recommendations, letter writing, and social media campaigns. Additionally, we'll implement our dedicated annual city budget priority session to gather youth insights on budget priorities.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Neha Pradeep Kumar, and this is my first year representing District 2 on the San Jose Youth Commission. The second objective is to inform and cultivate environmental advocacy among youth and upscale existing environmental solutions. Working with local organizations and city departments, the Commission aims to empower youth through an awareness campaign highlighting the effects of environmental concerns like invasive plants, microplastics, and food waste. We are also partnering with Beautify SJ and the Youth Empowerment Alliance to participate and promote activities like litter cleanups. Moreover, we're engaging school clubs to foster the growth and upkeep of school and community gardens.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Anya Mishra, and this is my first year representing District 1 on the San Jose Youth Commission. Our third and final objective is to explore and understand sexual harassment and assault support services. The Commission hopes to connect with local organizations and city departments to delve into sexual harassment and assault support services, as well as to guide a youth-driven awareness campaign that focuses on critical issues such as sexual harassment, assault, domestic violence, and promoting healthy relationships, aiming to better understand and address these concerns.
To support the Youth Commission's mission to promote resources and connect with underdeserved youth, our approach this year involves the addition of 2 new officer roles dedicated to communication and outreach. These positions will focus on the creation and execution of an annual outreach plan for the Commission, craft communication materials, and assist commissioners in promoting events and opportunities. We'll also actively engage with peers and communities at various events, coordinate forums and presentations, and maintain a robust online presence. Together, these efforts will strengthen our impact and visibility within San Jose. The Commission's next steps include developing and distributing a citywide survey to determine youth priorities, hosting our annual Youth Budget Priorities Summit, collaborating with city programs and community organizations to raise awareness about invasive plant species, and exploring resources related to sexual assault, violence, and safety. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm trying to get back to my screen, sorry. Do we have public comment?
Paul? Paul, you've been unmuted.
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. Thank you for the report. I think the youth that participate in this commission, and I've been participating as well with them for the past couple of years, they do excellent work in terms of their analysis and what is actually needed in the city. I like going there because they're very idealistic, but I think there is a component of information that's missing, and there does need to be a historical perspective whenever it is that they are looking at current conditions and assessing them. And the reason why that's important is because there is no disconnection between the past and the present. There is none. And just to say that these neighborhoods are marginalized, that's not good enough. That's just an adjective. We need to really start articulating specifically, because once we do that, once we start talking specifically about what is necessary in these neighborhoods and how these youth commissions can assist in that, then we will really actually get to solution-oriented comments or practices. You see, and I think that that's why everybody's here. Everybody's here in order to solve problems that are in our communities. But if we do not accurately assess them using a historical perspective, then it's just rhetoric. And I want to thank Councilman Ortiz and Candelas earlier in this conversation, because I think they articulated it accurately. But as also, I appreciate the comments that Angel Rios had stated, that it's just rhetoric, man, if we don't really have something concrete in policy. So what I'm asking is that there be some, at least, adult advisory that has equipped with them the knowledge and the expertise and an accurate assessment of the history of these barrios, because these barrios have been impacted by racism. They are not marginalized. It's embarrassing that the city does not take account for that. So, and you need to take a budgetary accounting for that.
We have one speaker card for Blair Beekman. Make your way down to the podium. You will have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks for City Manager Rios, Angel Rios, being here today. It's nice to see you after it's been a while. And really nice to hear the words of Paul Soto. I think he offered a really nice public comment today. Thank you. For myself, this item was brought to City Council a few days ago. I got a bit of the, I don't know what the term is, tut-tut by Mayor Mahan to stay on topic about concepts of tech accountability that I love so dearly, that I believe can really be of help to the Youth Commission and how they make their future decision making. And it's really good work. And I figured since then to learn how to be to speak more directly to things like the Children's Bill of Rights issues that I think can be, where they talk about the importance of tech accessibility within the Children's Bill of Rights, that in that framework, accountability becomes an important factor. And senior services and of other items you mentioned today, tech accessibility is an important new term for myself. Good luck how to develop those concepts as a youth commission. What I tried to say at Tuesday's meeting, and I guess the remainder of my time, if you can guys put up a clock or something so I can know how much time I have left. The Youth Commission learning to facilitate those things with everyday community, to bring that out for the community to better understand and work towards. Good luck in those efforts. That's key to being a youth commission, is to develop a whole community process. Good luck in how you can do that.
Thank you. Back to the committee.
Thank you. And before I go to my colleagues, I just want to thank you all. I was actually with my own teen on Tuesday evening, so I wasn't able to see your presentation then. I want to thank you for your service to our community and to your fellow youth. And I think this is a really, all three objectives are fantastic, and I like that you have a next steps. Everything is really well thought out here, and I really appreciate that. I did want to say one thing, well, two more things. One, I think having a communications and outreach person or people on your commission is a great idea, and I think it's really helpful for us to help get more information out to the younger members of our community. I also wanted to offer for your citywide youth survey, I'm sure this was mentioned on Tuesday, but you have 11 folks up here who have distribution lists, and we're happy to put that out as well. So hopefully we can get some additional reach there and help you get a better response for the youth survey and get more input, not just for the survey, but maybe interest to help have your own lists for outreach on a go-forward basis, if you want to add that to your survey questions. So with that, I'll go to my colleague, Councilmember Torres.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and all I have to say is move to approve item D3.
Thank you. All right. I know my colleagues all had lots of questions for you on Tuesday, so that's why there aren't any additional comments, and we are ready for the vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Again, thank you very much for always being well prepared and having well thought out slides and all the work that you do with the Youth Commission. Very, very much appreciated. And with that, we are ready for open forum.
We have one speaker card for Blair Beekman. You can make your way down.
It isn't working. There we go. Thank you. Hi. Thank you for fixing the timer. It's been out all this time. For myself, this is still 9/11 week, and I would like to continue to talk about 9/11 issues continuously through the year. Good luck how we can really address the day of what happened on 9/11 in our community future. I think when we do, I think we'd be better addressing the future concepts of how to limit war and use peace and open dialogue and open democracy as how to solve our issues of community life. It's really important we practice that. We're currently at war in the Ukraine. We have to really monitor and make sure that those war efforts do not hurt us here at the local level, and that takes a lot of effort from ourselves. Good luck in those efforts. We really can work towards peace and accountability and open democracy as a way to answer our issues and questions and not have to go to war in our future. Good luck how we can do that here. With my final time, I again also wanted to bring out, in talking about war, what's been going on with Paul Soto and his situation. Me and Paul, I think, have similar situations where we started coming to the public meeting.
Please address the whole the whole body, and please refrain from talking about individuals.
Well, for myself, I can say that the purpose of coming to the public meeting process was to learn to heal, basically, talk my problems out, address my issues, and develop conversational ways to be a part of the community process. Paul Soto, to mention his name, I think is doing much the same thing. And you guys have treated his situation much differently than my own. And we have to learn. I've had my own problems and issues. I've tried to work them out. We have to take that route with Paul. We have to think of counseling services before jail, please. Thank you.
Paul?
Hey, Blair, hey, Obi, thanks for the attempt, brother, but I don't need no counseling, man. I'm just fine. What I needed was to get my butt sober, and that's already happened. And Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. So, what needs to happen in this city is number one, I need to stop being surveilled. I filed a police report yesterday because I was followed while I was giving a presentation on the campus of San Jose State University. I gave a presentation to 2 different classes. So now there's 80 students in San Jose State University that knows that I exist in the body of my work. And I was surveilled, I was followed by somebody on that campus. Okay, last week, San Jose, the city of San Jose, tried to have me arrested twice. Once in the California room, 8 officers, and then 2 officers while I was exiting a county building where you have no jurisdiction. You have no jurisdiction in that, but that was a county building. Had nothing to do with the city. That's why I'm not arrested. So there's been crimes, little crimes committed against my person from this city. So we're going to have to deal with it in court. I know that that's what's going to happen and what I'm going to report. So, and now this person is surveilling. I'm being followed. Okay, so I made sure that I let Mata know, and I went to the police department and I filed a report because I'm not going to die. I'm not going to get killed on some accidental bike ride, or I'm not going to get shot in the middle of the night. And you put me and slander me inside the press and embarrass my father like that. You're not going to do that to me. You don't get my permission to do that. Okay, because I know that this is what the city has. The city wants me dead or wants me in a cell. You ain't got my permission to do either. Now, these are facts. There's a filed police report there, and I'm putting you on notice. The civil suit is coming, so prepare yourself, Nora Freeman.
Back to the committee.
Our meeting is adjourned.